can we switch over the slide to Slido, please? So we'll see which questions we've got coming in. So we've got questions to a number of the experts up on the panel that have been voted up here by the audience. So I'm going to start with the one that you can see there. You've also got the screens to the sides here, if you don't want to kind of crick your neck to look behind. The top one about eHealth is the most highly ranked question. Regional disparities were mentioned regarding eHealth. Can you elaborate on this? Will eHealth contribute to widening gaps between affluent, technologically advanced urban areas vis-à-vis poor rural regions, for example?
Well, we have certainly seen initially in the transition period some disparities of that sort, but I think the end game is that there will be full coverage of the infrastructure across the country and across Europe. I think where the struggle is today is mostly that countries simply don't have the physical infrastructure to deliver them. The second one is really about the digital literacy that I already mentioned, and this is something that is more a culture change and a shift. So I would think I'm an optimist, and I would say that no, it will not continue to diverge, but initially in the transition period, the early adopters will be the urban areas. So we probably have to have a very conscious and determined approach that rural areas catch up.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move to the second question that's on the screen there. So this is Jaume, this is for you. Green and open spaces are under multiple pressures. Climate change, urbanisation, densification, intensivization of agriculture. Do you include these pressures in GRETA as well? No?
Yeah, okay. We included, okay, we developed the green infrastructure focusing on three main objectives: to address climate change, and disaster risk reduction, water management, and the third, these two main policies. So, for example, urban pressure was not addressed explicitly as to build green infrastructure against that, but the methodology is developed in a way that we could include, we talk about strategical planet. So we can include this element, how to build green infrastructure against, for example, urban or sprawl or development in the peri-urban. There is something important there that I didn't mention, that is in this peri-urban area probably is the most important area where we need to really focus on the green infrastructure, because it's there where is more risk of this disconnection. So partly is included because it's partly in the policies that we focus, developing the green infrastructure at European level for this purpose, but it could be extended to these other elements. There is a third element that we didn't consider, and in general is what we identify on the application is not taken into account, that we develop green infrastructure under current conditions. But what will happen in 10 years? So maybe in 10 years, some species that we are now there, or they will need to require different management because climate change, or particularly in the Mediterranean, this green infrastructure that currently we have will be a challenge, how it will survive in 10 years' time even. So this is, I think, a general challenge that it's very and will need to be integrated more and more. And currently in most practices is, okay, we define now the green infrastructure, but this element is not yet fully integrated.
Don't turn the mic off, because there's one more question to you, which, because they're just being re-ranked, I've lost again. Here we go, right. So GRETA has a very urban-centric perspective. How were the views of rural stakeholders included in this project?
Yeah, maybe, yeah, the picture that I showed at the beginning looked like very urban-centric, but I would say in the project we had two parts, and the biggest part is in the rural setting, is not in the urban. In fact, the urban is the smallest part. then what we develop is basically on data and, let's say, evaluation on the real conditions. So at European level, we don't integrate views. However, when we move at the 8 case studies, in these 8 case studies, we integrate the views of the different stakeholders. And that is when we capture the potential conflicts that may arise, how it's planned. So, and the methodology that we develop at European level is we just measure what is available, what are the natural assets and the conditions. Based on that, there is a potential green infrastructure that could be delineated, and the next step would be when an area or region wants to implement is what integrate these views. And is what happened in the case studies where we get all these elements.
Right, excellent, thank you. So let's then move to the question about cultural heritage. So Elizabeth, this is for you. Cultural heritage, how does the evidence help places understand whether or not to prioritize / invest in culture? What about impacts of new / renewed cultural infrastructure on wider economic performance, e.g. creative industries, tech, talent attraction? Make of that what you wish.
Yeah, it works.
I think so, yeah.
Do I relate it with the other?
You can have a go and answer that one as well. That's up on the the third one there too. Yeah.
Yeah. I will reply for both of them, although they are quite different. This project has gone a bit higher level and more generic level, driven by the availability of data and the way that different countries are defining different objects. And this wants to say that it is very important to use the evidence in order to see what are the impacts, for example, of new cultural infrastructure. But when we're talking about EU-level comparisons, in order to be able to do this, we need to have common ways of measurement. And up until now, we have not seen that it is able to do that at the EU level, or even not full EU level, even at the level of 10 or 5 countries in the EU. The particular project we are talking about has focused on the general indicators of employment turnover and not gone into specific sectors, much more specific sectors, like the ones that have to do, for example, with new infrastructures or the creative industry as such. At the local level, that would be very useful, and I think possible to do even now. On the question, if we relate it to the question on the regulations, again, we did not do a full impact analysis of regulations, but the general feeling we get from the study is that the regulations are driven by local needs, of course. We're talking about objects in the local economies, and of course the countries have a say, and to some extent they should have a say, but this is a personal opinion. However, when we are talking about EU-level comparisons, we need a more comprehensive way of not only defining but also of collecting data in order to be able to say something further than wish lists of how things should be or not be.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we have a question about circular economy, which is the third one that's on the screen there, now at the top of the screen. So Carlos, for you, no, they're jumping around. Now second on the screen, can we inform the promotion of circular economies without flow data and maps? If you can have a go at that question, that would be good.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for the question. It's a very pertinent one, actually. There's basically a very simple answer. We don't have that information. We don't even have that information at country level. At the time the project was completed, this information was only available at European aggregated level. So information on trades and international exchanges. We are working with the domestic material consumption indicator, which implicitly already considered imports, material imports, and minus exports, and also considered domestic extraction. Nonetheless, all these indicators, also material flows, would not consider embedded consumption of materials that take place upstream. So perhaps you are importing an iPhone, which is very light, but that telephone has a huge material footprint, which is not included in the assessment. So for that, we concluded that what really matters is final consumption. That is also the reason why we approach this circular economy from a systemic perspective, because it's not possible to look at this only from a production perspective and not focusing also on final consumption. But unfortunately, this footprint approach is not feasible at this point.
Okay, if you could pass the microphone to he, because I bring the next question to you. Could you please give an example of an estimation of missing data? The question at the top there.
Yes, first.
It's on, it's good, yeah?
Okay. I have to say that this exercise is really indicator specific and country specific. If you have demographic data or economic data, the estimation techniques or the trends are not the same, let's say. And also, in each country, you might see different trends. So it's really indicator specific and country specific. So an example, for instance, if you have a missing data at NUTS 3 level, then you can use, if you have data at NUTS 2 or NUTS 1 level, you can use the trends at the upper level to apply it at the lower level. That's just one example of how we can do this. But there are several techniques depending on data, the length of the gaps, and so forth. So it's really a case-by-case approach that we have on these estimations.
Right, okay, let's round this session off with the question there that's in the middle. Do any of the presented projects have any case studies for Romania? Do any of you got anything from Romania? No? Cultural heritage?
We do have data for Romania, no case studies though.
Okay.
But we can speak about it.
All right. So no, unfortunately, is answer for whoever posed that. I think that covers, we've talked about downsides of e-services, I think. I know, do you want to have a quick go at that, because we've got another couple of minutes. Peter, about downsides of e-services. What are Peter's thoughts on downsides of such e-services? Namely, they are frequently developed as cheaper alternatives to better systems. They can also serve to isolate and disconnect remote communities/households.
I think that fear comes from the fact that it is technology-driven, but what we see in the Nordic countries is that the technology is already available and they are moving on to user-centric approach. And my feeling is that that would avoid that disconnect that the question is asking about. It is simply a tool to coordinate better service, and it doesn't replace the human interaction in healthcare. So if that kind of coordination can be better done as a result of introducing digital health, the rural communities will equally benefit, and it will actually not get isolated. As we have seen, if regions don't have the right expertise, very quickly they can, through audiovisual means, get access to that health delivery. So my thoughts are that this is only a potential risk if the implementers are focusing on technology rather than the user.
Okay, thank you. And indeed, I still have 1 more minute to go, so I'm going to come finally then back to Jaume to answer the question. GRETA, your map showed 3 ecosystem services. How did you reach this typology from the broad set of possible definitions?
Well, in fact, we used 10 ecosystem services, and this is a complete another domain of research. So the ecosystem services that we used is already available information at European level, and it's based on the MAES or MAES, that it's the European approach to ecosystem services, that it's a joint initiative of the Commission, the European Environment Agency, of course, and GRC. And basically, there is a systematic review. There is also a classification. It's called sizes, and it follows a systematic for the provision, regulation, etc. And from that, we selected 10. Well, let's say 9, and additionally another one that it's recreation, that it's more subjective, but it's important to include this aspect. And so it's already well accepted or accepted at European level. Is the best information that we have currently, so this could be improved. And with these 9 ecosystem services, we are able to link to the biodiversity, risk reduction, and and water management. And the final map, there were 3 categories that we call monofunctional, bifunctional, and multifunctional. So it was not only 3. I mean, this division has some explanation there why did that, but in fact we used these 9 ecosystem services. That is the best available information at European level. I want to say that, for example, in Switzerland, that it's part of the Alpine macroregion, that is one case study, they had a really nice example how they developed such ecosystem service at more fine-grained, with a cooperation with academia, with policy making. And another interesting example is in the Aquitania Basque Iru region, that they take our methodology and they are applying with their own data. And they have better information in ecosystem services, even they are including some additional ecosystem services. So the basis is the methodology, the approach, the contextual framework, and that it could be improved with better information.
All right, we'll draw that session to a close because I'm afraid we're out of time. Also, bearing in mind the complexity of that final question that we didn't much get to. Did you want to have a 30-second answer? Okay, yeah, they reckon you can do it in 30 seconds, go for it.
The answer is no. The study has not gone that far to explore causality. The reasons are 3. One is because we will need to go down to less generic indicators than employment, GVA, and turnover, and go down to far more specific indicators and also factor indicators to explain the causality. Second is that we will need a bigger pool of countries than 10 countries, and also we would need more time series in order to explore causality. I think it's a very good point for next studies and next work.
Right, excellent, super quick answers there. So that I would like to then give all of the speakers a warm round of applause also for answering so many questions. Thank you very much indeed.